To Justinian's other great church, Hagia Sophia. For nearly 1,000 years, Hagia Sophia was the largest cathedral in the world. Remember that Sinan the Great spent his lifetime trying to equal it in the name of Allah. So, is this a basilican axial or longitudinal plan church? Or is it a central plan church like San Vitale? Well, the answer is it's both, which is what made Hagia Sophia so transformative in the history of architecture. Justinian wanted to have it all: the huge rectangular spaces of the basilican church and the soaring domes of the central plan. So how did he do it? Well, you may have noticed that once again we did not assign a Khan Academy video on this very important work because we're saving it for class. Please take notes on this video. Your workbook has prompts. Let me just add that your test will include lots of questions on this church. When was it constructed? Who was its patron? Who were its architects? So you need to recognize the names, know their profession, which I just told you. So I'm assuming you've watched the video. Let me just recap a few points. Remember that the College Board is interested in change over time and the reinterpretation of works. So what's been added to the exterior of Hagia Sophia and why? Well, those slim, slender towers are minarets where people are called to prayer. Now, part of what makes visiting Hagia Sophia rather a surreal experience is this juxtaposition of Christian mosaics and Arab calligraphy. Now, Hagia Sophia is currently a museum. There is some pressure to restore its status as a mosque. Note that the current floor plan includes a maksura, a minbar, and a mihrab. Do you remember what those three items are? The mihrab is the prayer niche facing toward Mecca. The minbar is a pulpit. A maksura is the special space reserved for rulers. Not all mosques had them. Now, I couldn't find an image of Hagia Sophia's maksura. I tried. But here is the imperial door into the narthex. This is the door that only the emperor could enter. One way in which Hagia Sophia did not change when it was transformed into a mosque is that it continued to showcase and reinforce imperial power. It's just that the empire switched from Byzantine to Ottoman. When Sultan Mehmed the Conqueror entered Hagia Sophia for the first time in May of 1453, he walked through this door, which was highly symbolic. He also, according to historical accounts, rubbed ashes on his head in humility and ordered that the great church be cleansed, renewed, and dedicated as a mosque. So this gives you a closer look at the mosaic on the tympanum, or half circle above the imperial door. How do you know it's not part of Justinian's original design? Well, it's a mosaic with images, so it has to have been installed after the outbreak of iconoclasm. As the video noted, there were not, in fact, many images in the original Hagia Sophia, unlike Justinian's church at San Vitale. Those that there were in many Byzantine churches in Constantinople were destroyed and then recreated. So these mosaics date back to the 9th or 10th century, again, after the end of the iconoclastic controversy. We see Emperor Leo VI with a halo over his head, bowing in respect to Christ, who is seated on a jeweled throne. With his right hand, Christ is blessing the emperor, and his left hand is holding a book on which is written, "Peace be with you, I am the light of the world." On both sides of Christ, there are figures in roundels. Remember that term? One of them is his mother Mary, and the other is the Archangel Gabriel. And of course, the image is intended to show the timeless power of the emperor and his subjects being blessed by Christ. Here's another mosaic from Hagia Sophia created after the iconoclastic battles of the 8th and 9th centuries. Christ Pantocrator again means Christ, Lord of hosts, or ruler of the world, and it is probably the most common image of Christ in later Byzantine art, even though you don't really have an example in your required works. Almost every Byzantine church had some variation of this image, which associate Christ with rulership and therefore, of course, with empire. So what are some other distinctly Byzantine features of this image? Well, we see that highly frontal pose, the long, thin nose, almond-shaped eyes, a very heavy reliance on line to establish strong contours, and a stylized, flat, unmodeled features of clothing and body. Here, by contrast, is the much earlier apse mosaic from San Vitale, also of Christ Pantocrator, ruler of the world. He's handing a martyr's crown to San Vitale, while Bishop Eusebius is handing a model of the church to Christ. Note that this is the much younger Christ depicted in earlier Christian art. Still, in comparison with the Christ the Good Shepherd mosaic, which I showed you before, this is very much a Byzantine image. Note that the blue sky of the Good Shepherd mosaic has been replaced by the golden sky of Byzantine mosaics. And what's the significance of this change, other than evidence that Justinian had money to burn, or thought he did? The Byzantine Church and the Orthodox churches still place greater emphasis on the spiritual, otherworldly nature of God and Christ. Byzantine art is more abstract, more symbolic, and less naturalistic than early Christian art, or for that matter, later Gothic Christian art. Stay tuned. It's also much more imperial, which accounts in part for the lavish use of expensive materials. Well, I don't really know if you need to know this, but it may be on the test. An iconostasis is a wall of icons and religious paintings separating the nave from the sanctuary in a Byzantine church. And by the way, we'll see similar screens in the Catholic Church. Here are two examples of an Roman Catholic Church, that is. Here are two examples of an iconostasis. The one on the left is from a Russian Orthodox church in Moscow, and the one on the right is from Hagia Sophia. Again, you see a post-iconoclasm remodeling. You should remember the image of the Virgin in the apse above the altar. Note that in Orthodox liturgies, the priest is much more separated from the people. There's that greater emphasis on Christ ruling over the world and to some extent standing outside the world, which is characteristic of the Orthodox faith and practice and reinforced by architecture. Function and form again. Now, the College Board has simply cut out what I consider to be an important swath of medieval art, the art of the Carolingian Renaissance under Charlemagne and the subsequent Ottonian Empire ruled by Charlemagne's Saxon successors. I'm going to talk about this art anyway, a little, in my next lecture, but this work fits better here. Charlemagne's Palace Church in Aachen used to be an AP favorite, and I've kept some questions about it because it's a very important church, and because the College Board might just get sneaky and invite the comparison as one of those works for attribution. Charlemagne set out to restore Roman glory and classical learning. He had himself crowned Holy Roman Emperor by the Pope in the year 800, Christmas Day, and he revived manuscript creation in Europe outside the Celtic fringe of Ireland and Northumbria. We'll talk about that next lecture. He visited Ravenna, where San Vitale is, on several occasions, and his imperial church clearly imitates San Vitale, which is why I think it might possibly show up. So we'll finish up today with a short podcast on the remaining Byzantine requirements.